little more the strategy and the ideas of what you're doing. You're just talking about creating, but if you could unpack that a little bit,
Yeah,
I'd like to
well,
hear about what it is that you want to do and you want to see.
I'll tell you how we arrived at that, and because I think it's relevant for everybody who's watching and listening. We fought for justice for Michael Brown, for Tamir Rice, who a 12-year-old boy who was brutally murdered in Cleveland. We fought for justice for Eric Garner, for Alton Sterling, for Philando Castile, for Sandra Bland, for Freddie Gray, and not a single one of those families got justice. None of them, zero. And and it wasn't because we didn't march enough. We People marched. It wasn't because they weren't hashtags and trending topics. These were the number one trending names in the world, not just in our communities, not just in a niche place. These were the cover stories of every newspaper in our country, and we still got no justice. And it then required us to go, Carmela, to that imaginative place to say, how do we change the equation here? And what we realized is we were demanding justice from people who would never give it to us. They had no intention. They didn't respect us. In some ways, we didn't vote for them. We didn't donate to them. They didn't know us. They
Yeah.
didn't come from our communities. They didn't love or care about our communities. So out of that came this idea of our organization, Real Justice, that we need to put people in power who are accountable to us, who love us and value us, who are willing to see the world and see the justice system in a very different way. And you can approach any problem that way. In some ways, you have to reverse engineer a problem and start at what you want that thing to look like and figure out how do we get there. And what I talk about in the book, Claudia, is that a lot of the things that we do, and this is a painful thing for me to say, a lot of the things that we do build real awareness, and awareness matters. Sometimes that's all it does. Is it just builds awareness, but it doesn't necessarily lead to action. And sometimes there's this huge gap between the awareness we build and the change we want. And I
Wow.
try to answer in the book what's between that gap, because right now we have international awareness of what happened to Breonna Taylor,
Yes.
but we don't have the action. And how do we build that gap to have it? And some of the answers that I provide are not necessarily what people would expect. It's change is hard. Systems are hard to change, and but we have to be taking the right steps to make change. Change will never happen accidentally. I mean, it always requires a strategy. It requires like a sophisticated plan that's as complicated as the problem itself.
Yeah.
And sometimes the problem overwhelms our plans. And and what I want to say to people, and I said a version of this in I won't name the city, but I said this in a major American city, and started getting heckled by the crowd. And what I said is that sometimes our plans, it is hurtful. Sometimes our plans are not good enough. Sometimes they're not robust enough. Sometimes they're not strategic enough. Sometimes we have all the energy we need, but you could write the plan on the back of a napkin. And if your plan doesn't meet the moment, the moment it the moment will bulldoze right over your plan.
Wow.
And what I'm trying to do there is not critique us. I'm
Yeah.
trying to give us agency to say, listen, we can succeed more if we spend time in strategic ways to respond to our worst problems in some ways that may actually work. It's not a criticism. It's
Yeah.
to say that we have to pivot sometimes to do what we know could actually work.
I think that was one of the most powerful yet overwhelming aspects of the book. And when you were breaking down the amount of work, labor, thought,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
time that really goes into organizing, really shifting from awareness. And really, what I kind of saw in here as well is there's a shift from awareness to charity to
Yeah.
justice.
Yeah.
And it's like all three of these things are very different. All three of these things are very necessary, but
Mm-hmm.
they are separate entities. And
Yeah.
too many times we try to argue that, well, I'm just going to do awareness and awareness equals justice, or I'm just going to do charity and charity equals justice. Whereas what I felt like I read you saying was, no, justice is justice and
Yeah.
we need awareness and we need charity, but we have to be willing to celebrate the wins,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
celebrate
Yeah.
what we have done effectively, celebrate, the demonstration, celebrate the work, but be willing to be honest with ourselves and hold
Mm-hmm.
ourselves accountable and say, there's more, there's space for growth, there's space for way more intentional, strategic engagement. And I think that that's something that we haven't really heard from our activists, our leaders, to be able to honestly say, not everybody can say I've written 1,500 articles, Shaun. Like not
Right.
everybody
Right.
can say like I have lobbied and talked with politicians, or I have worked to get DAs in office. I have
Mm-hmm.
done all of these things. And that individual to still say there's more
Well,
really causes you to think
well,
about,
part of it,
you know.
in the book, in some ways, I am even critiquing my own life to say that a lot of what I did, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of what I have done over the course of my life built awareness of our problems, but it
Mhm.
didn't actually change them. And it just took me years of building all the I thought,
Mhm.
it was a painful realization. I thought that if people in power were aware of our greatest problems,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that they would make the change. And the lesson that I learned is no, they are fully willing to be completely aware of our worst problems and do nothing about them.
Mhm.
And that awareness can create the climate for change,
Mhm.
but it's not change itself. And in fact, awareness is far removed from the change. Now, you don't have change without the awareness. It builds the momentum,
Mm-hmm.
it builds the energy, it begins to build structure, but a lot of times we focus 95% of our effort on the awareness, and then
Mm-hmm.
we just have this little 5% of us left. And I'm saying we need more balance between awareness and the systems building, the plan creation. And then even one of the lessons I try to share is that a plan is really only as effective as the ability of everyday people to repeat that thing back to you. And
Mhm.
if you have a wonderful plan but nobody knows it, then it's not effective. I mean,
Mhm.
people have to say, here is the plan and here's where we're moving.
Mhm.
Now that sounds discouraging, but I even hear that and I'm encouraged, because what that means is we haven't done our best work. It
Yeah.
means that I would be discouraged if I thought we had all done the very best we could possibly do and
Mm-hmm.
then nothing changed. What I'm saying is, I think we're only scratching the surface of what we can do.
And we can do
And
more.
yeah, and we can do so much more. That's right.